Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the nation. Today I am interviewing another person. I know it sounds very cliche now that my channel feels like it's just going through interviews, but I have to get this out of the way because this is a series I started 2 years ago that I want to keep continuing to do. And today I am joined by.
Uh, uh, I'm not even sure how to pronounce my name. I think that was, well, somewhat deliberate. Anyway, you can call me Anon,
I just named you Anonymous.
or Anon 3 Must 1, as some people call me.
Okay, so, what can you tell me about yourself?
Um, well, I suppose what your listeners would be interested in is I've been a Bernie since 2011, so way back in the day. I got into it just after the second episode came out.
What got you into the fandom?
It's quite a silly story, and people tend not to believe me when I say it, but when I was looking on the internet, I can't remember what site, but I saw an image macro of Twilight at her party in the first episode, and it's that screen cap which makes it look like she's drinking alcohol, and it said, "Confound these ponies, they drive me to drink." And I saw that, and I assumed at that time that it was a show, like a comedy show for adults, and I went and watched it, and I'm like, wow, that is not what I expected, but it's good. and and I just kept watching.
Okay, okay. What got you into FOE?
Um, well, I mean, I've been into the Fallout series for ages, and I've always liked fan fiction. So once I got into My Little Pony, it just seemed like an obvious step to take. I started reading it on daily, and yeah.
How do the stories make you feel? What ones have you read?
I've read most of the main ones. So I've read the main story. I've read Project Horizons, Pink Eyes, um, Murky Number Seven,
Hmm.
uh, a whole bunch of other ones. A good one.
How does your story make you feel?
Um, well, when I look at my story, I feel bad because I never managed to finish it. So that would really be how it makes me feel.
Ah, you never finished it.
Well, I have a lot of trouble with I have a lot of trouble with writing, which sounds familiar, I guess, for everyone who knows fan fiction authors. And just kept procrastinating and got writer's block. Couldn't manage to write the next chapter. That happened several times. So if you notice, there's like a year and a half gap between several of the chapters. So you know, all the typical fan fiction author things.
Hmm. And what time placement does your story take place?
Well, my story takes place kind of at an indeterminate time. It would probably be after Little Pip left the vault, but it was going to take off in a different direction, so it was never going to really interact with the main story. So it was before the day of Sunshine and Rainbows, but sometime during the main story.
What can you tell me about your story?
Well, when you describe my story from a synopsis, it sounds like a really bad idea, and that's because it is. But my idea was to take a stupid idea and see how seriously and well I could actually make the story. So my story is there's a US Marine in Afghanistan and he gets sucked through a portal into Fallout Equestria.
Okay, okay. And what proceeds to happen?
Well, after he gets sucked through, he finds that he's got a pip buck strapped onto his wrist, and that it was put there by the Voltech because they want to do an experiment and they want to see what aliens will have to say about ponies causing the apocalypse.
That sounds really ridiculous now that you put it like that.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
And what has happened so far in your story?
So far, the Marine gets transported to Equestria, finds a sprite bot which tells him about the Voltec experiment. Then he tries to negotiate with ponies for food, but they shoot at him, and he shoots back, and then they all die. So he takes their stuff, but then he realizes that they actually have a child, which he hasn't killed, and he has to try and nurse that kid back to health. Um, um, then the kid tries to kill him, but doesn't manage to. And then they go on a trip to try and get the cult back to the remaining family that he has, but they get ambushed by Steel Rangers, and then the Steel Rangers get ambushed by Hellhounds.
Okay, okay. Um, is your story very described?
Um, I'm not 100% sure what you mean by that, but yes, the story is it's quite fleshed out. It does have a lot of it's mostly descriptions with not much dialogue.
Okay, okay. So, seems you're kind of doing better than my story ever did. Sad days.
I can't say that I've read it.
It it never
I
finished.
suppose maybe it would have been interesting to read that before the interview, but oh well.
It's stupid. It's dumb. I'm pretty sure we talked a while back about it, but oh well.
Yeah, I'm sorry if you ever asked me for something and I didn't get back to you. It's just yeah, I haven't really been too active in the last little while.
Okay. Tell me this. Did you have an idea for how your story was gonna end?
Well, I mean, keeping in the spirit of ridiculousness, it was going to end with the Marine managing to be transported back to Afghanistan, but with the pony still with him, and with him having a robotic arm.
Hmm. What pony?
The pony, his name was Inkblot, who was the kid of the ponies which he ended up killing in self-defense.
Ah, did he meet anybody else?
Well, he would have met a lot of different people. There would be King Fido, who was the leader of the Diamond Dogs, or the Hellhound tribe.
So would you say that you drew some inspiration from Project Horizons?
Yeah, I would say so. I can't think of anything specific off the top of my head, but yeah.
And would there have been any character main to the story that would have died? Would this story be tragic?
Well, I mean, I didn't really get far enough in my story to establish the characters that would have died, but yeah, there would have been.
So your story isn't very long, but it's still popular.
I didn't hear what you just said. Say again.
Uh, are you shocked that your story is popular even though the chapters aren't many?
Yeah, this it's quite popular. I think partly because of my YouTube channel, which I did readings of my story on. My YouTube channel is a bit more popular than my fanfic.
Ah, and have you finished any of the bigger stories?
Uh, finished
What?
or finished. I haven't written anything which was big, but I finished reading story.
That's what I meant. I said, did you finish any of the bigger stories?
Yeah, yeah. I read Project Horizons. I read the main one. Read Pink Eyes. Murky Number Seven.
Did you finish Project Horizons?
Sorry, what about Project Horizons?
Did you finish it? Did you finish
I'm
it?
sorry. Are you still there?
Hello?
Did I finish Project Horizons? Yeah, I finished Project Horizons.
How
I
did
actually
it
made
make you
some fan
feel?
music for Project Horizons. Um, how did it make me feel? Wow. It made me feel sad because it was over. That would be the main thing. I actually spent a while not reading the last chapter just because I didn't want it to be over. But well, I mean, Somba's come out with Homelands now, which I haven't actually started. But yeah, so the story continues.
Actually, it does not. Blackjack is dead
Well, yeah, but the story continues
with
even without
Scotch tape.
Blackjack. Even if we've spoiled the audience now.
Doesn't matter. It's been like
I
seven
guess it's
years.
an old fanfic at this point,
It's been
so it
7
doesn't
years.
really matter.
Um,
But
I
if anyone's read chapter 37 of Project Horizons, there's a link to a song. I think it's chapter 37, and that's me who made that song.
oh, interesting. I had quite a few songs that I wrote in my original fanfic of Fallout Equestria Shattered Memories, but the story flopped, so I didn't never get anywhere. I'm kind of really stuck, and I got really big writer's block. I don't even know where to go because I can't describe a story very well.
In terms of descriptive writing, or
Just making detail, fleshing out characters, fleshing out background, fleshing out the landscape.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's definitely a skill. I mean, the skill which I lack would be the skill to actually sit down and be able to write something. I'd say that my kind of perfectionism and my need to actually get something properly described and properly done is the reason why I didn't actually manage to put out that many chapters in the end.
So I also interviewed Mimizinga, and they had said that they would never change anything about the ending of their story, and they're no longer like writing. Do you know who Mimizinga is?
Sorry, you didn't. You cut out there. Say again.
Do you know who Mimizinga is?
Uh, sorry. Try again.
My fucking god.
I can't say that I do off the top of my head.
They're the writer who made Pink Eyes.
Oh, right. Yeah, that was a long time ago when I read Pink Eyes. Yeah, I read that back when it was coming out.
Yeah, I kind of dropped the story until like later when I actually read it, and it made me cry at the end.
Oh, it's a very sad story. It's yeah, it's a particular type of story where you have an oblivious protagonist who doesn't know what's going on, but they're in a very sad situation. I'm trying to recall some published novels which I've read, which were actually with that same sort of style, but I can't off the top of my head. I know they exist though. It's an interesting genre.
It's funny too because um, I want to ask as many Fallout Equestria writers as possible this question, but I also asked Mimizinga too how like what he thought of his story being non-canon and what his opinion was on the whole afterlife thing.
The Afterlife thing.
Yes. This makes me feel like you didn't finish the book.
It was a long time ago when I read this. I'm having trouble recalling.
Okay, so spoilers. The main character dies, but then she goes to the afterlife, and it's it was really strange to me because I was like, wait, this isn't right. There's no afterlife in Fallout Equestria.
Doesn't that kind of have to be because there's souls and stuff, especially in Project Horizons?
Yeah, but Project Horizons stated where the souls went. The Soul Eater.
Yeah, but I mean yeah, it's like that. There has to be an afterlife for the souls, right? It doesn't. That doesn't really break canon.
Well, they were all grabbed by the Soul Eater.
Yeah, but that's not where they're supposed to go.
But that's where they all went, and Pink Eyes is around the same time as Project Horizons and uh, um, the original. But when I asked him about it, he put a really interesting concept on it that made me think. He stated that he doesn't care if the story is considered canon or non-canon. He can consider the story like a fable or like a book if it's non-canon in the Fallout Equestria to like read to your children.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on it. I mean, when you look at canon, when you're talking about fan fictions, it can get very complicated. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with the MLP time loops or the Infinite Loops project, but I got involved with that recently, and the rules of canon in that are very complicated.
Yeah, it still pisses me off to this day that KCAT copyrighted Fallout Equestria, saying it's her own.
Right, but I mean, what? Well, it's like even if it's copyrighted, we can still write fan fiction, so I don't see how that really changes.
She won't allow us to hardcover publish.
Well, I mean, I've never really been I've never really been too interested in that sort of thing because I'm not really one who looks at that. But yeah, I mean, I suppose that's not a very nice thing to do. But I mean, all someone would have to do is just remove the words "Fallout Equestria" from the cover, and it would be fine.
Okay. Um, what what were you doing around the time before Fallout Equestria was a thing?
Before I started looking into fan fiction, I was doing videos on YouTube.
What do you do nowadays?
In terms of creative things, not a huge amount really. Um, I've been thinking of continuing my story, but it has been 2 years.
Would you say that if you had the chance, would you change anything about your story?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I had this whole idea about later. I had this whole idea later on that I was going to change. where the story was set. So instead of having him transported to Ponyville, he would be transported to this this kind of ponified version of Afghanistan, which I wrote a whole bunch of lore about. So if I started the story again, I would probably start him off there rather than starting him in Ponyville, which is kind of cliche and kind of limited my options. So then I was kind of thinking later on, like, how can I actually get him to be transported to this other place without it kind of breaking the story? So yeah, I would definitely change that if I was going to write it again.
Um, and also, if you wrote your story in 2018, what would be different?
Well, for starters, I think the audience would be much smaller. Um, Back when I came out with my story was right at the peak, I think, of interest in Fallout Equestria spin-offs. And because it was the first human in Fallout Equestria spin-off which existed, it, or at least the first one where the protagonist doesn't turn into a pony and stays a human in Fallout Equestria. I think that kind of intersection of different genres kind of positioned it so that it gained quite a lot of fame. Well, not fame exactly, but it gained a lot of views, and people seemed to like it. I think if I published it now, it would be much more difficult to get an audience.
It seems that I believe in your aspect, I believe you are the only author who has written a human in Fallout Equestria story.
Not strictly true. There were a couple others. Um, Fallout Equestria Foreigner, I think, was one.
I'm pretty sure that was Equestria Girls.
Uh, I'm not sure. I've only read the start of that one, but yeah, I could be. I could be the only one.
And thinking about it now, how do you feel about any of the other authors? Do you feel like some of them are better than you? Did you inspire from some of them?
Oh, wait, no, I definitely not the only one. There was Equestrian Wanderings, which was by quite a famous author.
Okay, okay. Um, what did you take from any of the Fallout Equestria stories? Hello?
I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. They were definitely they were definitely entertaining, and but I don't think I had a particular. I don't think I really took anything philosophical away from them or anything.
Ideas, landscape, characters?
Oh, you mean take them for my story, or
Yes. Yes.
I'm not sure if you're saying anything, but I can't hear you at the moment.
Yes.
Say again? I
Y-
didn't
yes.
hear that. Okay. Okay, the story was Fallout Equestrian Wanderings by Ed2481. So, yeah, after he did Light Wanderings and Dark Wanderings with Pony in Fallout, he then took his characters to Fallout Equestria, which was kind of interesting.
Okay, okay. Man. Oh, man. What else can I ask you?
Well, I think the music which I did for Fallout Equestria was probably more widely known and influential than my story, to tell you the truth.
Ah, so you've created music.
Right. I did the Fallout Equestria, um, a couple of songs from Fallout Equestria. I did at the end of the trail, which is probably the most famous one because it's actually linked in the story. And there's also Whiskey, which I did a version of. And then I also did a ballad which I wrote for Fallout Equestria Heroes.
Oh, Heroes. I have yet to read that. Is it any good?
Well, I think so. I mean, I wrote a song about it.
What should I expect from it? What should I expect from it?
I didn't hear what you said again. Connection's really spotty. Well, Heroes is a story about, well, it's a story about a character with strength 10 and intelligence 2, I think. So, it's quite funny. And I think it's quite well done.
So this story took aspects from the game.
Well, I mean, every story takes aspects from the game to some degree, but I mean, this one, I suppose, it kind of takes inspiration from like a low intelligence run, which you would do in Fallout. So the character, they're just not that smart, but they're really strong. So they, yeah, they get into a lot of trouble, but they manage to fight their way out, just kind of with their grit and strength, even if they get shot a lot of times.
I actually had a similar idea for that. Like in my the the second and third chapter of my story, there was like a little part where after my character gets into this fight in this town because there's slavers enslaving children. She makes a stop to it and like gets beat up, but like her pit butt like chimes off saying that she's leveled up. So and so of this and this and this has uh upgraded, and she was like very confused about it, like stating that stable tech is very weird, and it was not to the leveling up system.
Oh, right, the leveling up system. That's an interesting topic because some stories take the leveling up system to be like an in-universe thing which the character can see, and other ones kind of take it as just something they put on the end of the chapter, just as a kind of wink to the audience. So your story was one where it was something the character could see?
Yes, and I feel like I'm probably not, but I feel like I was the first one to do that. But I'm
Could
probably
very well
wrong.
be. Well, I certainly know that Ed2481 did it in his story, but that was not a Fallout Equestria story. That was a pony in Fallout vanilla story.
Haha, interesting. Um, I have a few other questions for you. Um, and I'd like to know, like, kind of a lot of the spoilers. So you read Murky Number 7.
My memory of Murky Number 7 is murky. It's a very long story which I read a long time ago.
Can't be longer than Project Horizons.
Is it better than Project Horizons?
No, I
Well,
said it
it's got a
can't
more
be
serious
longer.
tone. I think I think it's longer. I'm not sure if it's longer or not, but it's certainly close. It's over 1 million words.
Over a million, huh? Do you want to know how much Project Horizons is at?
I think both of them are over a million words.
Project Horizons is at 1.7 million words.
Murky Number Seven is just over a million.
Okay. Um, what can you tell me about it?
Um, wow. I'm not a good person to ask about this because I remember so little of it. Um, Murky Number Seven is a very dark story, and it's brutal. Like, you feel for the main character, you feel their struggle, and it just seems like every time it builds up to the point where you feel like they're actually going to get something, it's just ripped away at the last moment.
Hmm. What happens throughout the story?
Um, I I don't think I can really remember enough to actually do it justice.
Who dies?
Well, the main character dies at one point, but then they come back to life.
Oh, so they took inspiration from Project Horizons.
Quite possibly, yes. Well, undoubtedly.
Oh man. Ah.
Mm. Well, one of the interesting things we haven't really talked about, I guess, with my story is the military aspect of it.
Ah, yes. What can you tell me about that?
Well, when I was writing my story, or when I was starting to write my story, I wanted to actually talk to people who were in the military and do as much research as I could to actually make it feel like it was real. So, because I looked at a whole bunch of the other stories about military characters who got sucked into the Equestria, or, well, usually sucked into Equestria is the story, and they just seemed so kind of gung ho and what a teenager might imagine being in the military is like, but not actually what it would be like to be in the military in terms of the culture and in terms of how people actually feel about their own profession. So I went and I did a bunch of research and I talked to a bunch of people who were actually in the military in order to try and make my character as realistic as possible to what a Marine would actually be like in that sort of situation.
That's interesting too because talking about military stuff. By the way, I don't want to I don't want to brag, but you know the movie Lone Survivor.
I have not actually seen it.
So there was a pilot that picked up the lone survivor in the movie, and uh, IRL, by the way, um, I met I met the pilot.
Wow.
Yeah, he is the father of this guy I know named Jensen. So yeah, hopefully I'm not bragging.
Well, I mean, that's certainly something to brag about. My favorite brag is when my fanfiction got posted on a website, which is purely just to make fun of bad fanfiction. There was someone on the site was saying, "Oh, you know, this is totally unrealistic. Like that, the main character would enjoy Call of Duty and all this kind of stuff." And it's like, well, actually, the age of people who are joining the military these days, it yeah, it would not be very surprising.
Um,
It feels good when I have people who are in the military saying that my defending my story and saying that it actually is realistic to their situation. Obviously, it's not perfect because I've never been there, but that definitely feels.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you something very sad around the end after we finish up the interview, or two things sad. But right now, is there anybody else in the fandom you know who has gotten famous?
Gotten famous. Um, not not that I know personally. No.
Um, do you still do stuff in the fandom?
Um, I don't really put out much. Um, that came out wrong. I don't really do much in terms of putting out content, but I still read. Uh, I read stuff.
Hmm. Um, do you feel the reason you don't put out content and upload content is because of the ad apocalypse on YouTube?
No, I never monetized any of my videos. All of them I think had copyrighted music in them, so I couldn't monetize them in the first place. Yeah, it was never about money for me. I don't think I've made a cent.
No, yeah, I got banned. They banned me from the sponsorship of monetization.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh, that sucks. I've got two channels which are technically able to be monetized, but I've never gotten a check.
Hmm. Let's see. So I've interviewed quite a few people actually. Uh, you are you're definitely not the first, and you're definitely not the last. Let's just say that. But
I'm not the first. What? I'm not the first to do what?
you're not the first person I've interviewed, and you're not the last.
Oh, yeah.
Um. Okay, so since there's nothing else to say, I thought there was gonna be more dragged out. But is there anything else you'd like to say?
Ah, not that I can think of. Um, maybe I should have prepared better for this.
It's all right. Okay, so I'm gonna say my cringy outro. Okay. So, hope you guys really liked that video, or what's gonna come of it. Not video, interview. But remember, join Nation, Prude Nation. Bye bye.